So, here's the deal, I'm a 25-year-old guy, and my mother, well, she's a piece of work. But that's not the crazy part. No, the real kicker comes in when I tell you who she was messing with behind my back. It wasn't some random guy she met at the supermarket, or even someone from the office. Nah, it was my uncle. Yeah, my mom went behind my back and got tangled up with my uncle. You know, my dad's brother. It hit me hard, not just because of the betrayal, but because of the way she was treating me, like I didn't matter. Like I was just some pawn in whatever twisted game she was playing. And to be honest, at first, I didn't even know what to do with myself. I mean, who could? Imagine the gut punch of realizing that the woman who brought you into this world, the one who raised you and promised to protect you, was the one who'd been stabbing you in the back. But here's the thing, I wasn't going to let this slide. No way. I wasn't some passive spectator in my own life. This was my family, my future, and I was going to take control. I'll admit, when I first found out, my world just paused. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the fact that everything I thought I knew about my family, about the way things were supposed to be, was a lie. I walked around for days in a fog, trying to piece everything together, but the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. The more I realized just how deep this ran. I knew I had to act, but the question was how? How do you confront a mother who's willing to cross the line with your uncle, a man who's supposed to be family? How do you even begin to handle that without completely losing it? Here's what pushed me over the edge, the family business. For as long as I can remember, I've been the one handling it. Not that I was ever properly acknowledged for it. Mom made it clear that she was in charge, but anyone who knew anything about the business knew that I was the one keeping it afloat. I did the work, I made the tough calls, I kept things moving, all while dealing with Mom's questionable decisions. But the moment she started pulling her shady stuff with my uncle, I realized something, the business wasn't hers. It was mine. And I was going to take it back, no more being ignored, no more playing second fiddle. I could have confronted them, right? Told Mom I knew everything, had the big dramatic showdown, but I'm not that dumb. I knew that would only give them a chance to spin the story and make me look crazy. So I went a different route. I took control. Quietly, subtly, and with a plan that would knock them both off their feet. It was like playing chess, except I wasn't just thinking 3 moves ahead, I was thinking about the entire game. The goal was simple, expose her, expose him, and take back everything they tried to steal. But man, I knew it wouldn't be easy. They were both so used to having all the power, so used to the manipulation, that they'd never see it coming. I wasn't going to be the victim here. No, I was going to flip the script. And the first step was taking the family business and making sure she knew I was in control now. I wasn't going to sit around and let her tear everything apart. I had a legacy to protect. I had a future to build. As I sat back, watching everything unfold, the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every step I took was calculated. Every move was about more than just the business, it was about setting the record straight. And trust me, when that moment came, when everything crashed down, I wasn't going to just expose them. No, I was going to take the power back, and it was going to be sweet. But before I could do that, I had to wait. I had to bide my time. There were things I needed to set in motion. And the longer I waited, the more I could feel the tension growing. The deeper I dug into their secrets, the closer I got to the moment when everything would change. This wasn't just about getting back at her. This was about rewriting the narrative, taking control of my life, and making sure my future was mine, and mine alone. So here I am, sitting in the office one morning, just another regular day, right? Well, it wasn't. It felt like the calm before a storm, you know? I had already taken steps to regain control of the business, slowly shifting things around, tightening my grip. But there's always that feeling, that gut feeling, when you know something is about to happen, something big, and you can't quite put your finger on it. I had this uneasy sense that things were slipping out of my hands again, and this time, it wasn't just my mom and uncle. No, it was the people closest to me, the ones who had been around the business for years, that I started to worry about. There were whispers, little comments, a shift in the air every time I walked into a room. I knew what was coming, but nothing could have prepared me for the phone call that hit like a freight train. It was Thursday afternoon. I had just finished a meeting with a few key people who had been helping me with the restructuring. Things were going great on the surface, but that nagging feeling in my stomach kept gnawing at me. I stepped outside to grab a coffee, hoping the fresh air would clear my head. Then, my phone rang. It was from one of the business partners. I knew them well enough, but honestly, I wasn't expecting anything important. When I picked up, the voice on the other end was frantic. "You need to come in right now. There's been some trouble. Serious trouble." My heart dropped straight into my stomach. "What kind of trouble?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I was already on edge. There was a pause. Then the words I'd been dreading. "It's your mom. She's been making some questionable decisions again. And it's affecting everything. You need to get here." The whole world stopped spinning for a second. I could feel the blood rush to my ears, the room suddenly feeling a little too small. But I didn't panic. Not yet, anyway. I grabbed my coat and bolted out the door. When I got to the office, the tension was palpable. People were whispering in corners, avoiding eye contact, and acting like they were trying to keep some big secret. I walked through the hallway with my head high, but internally, I was a mess. I could feel my pulse pounding in my neck. Every step I took felt like it was building towards something huge, something that would change everything. I finally made it to the back office where a few of the partners were gathered. They looked like they had just seen a ghost. But before I could say anything, one of them spoke up, her face a mask of concern. "It's bad, you don't understand. Your mother, she's been funneling money out of the business. Huge sums. And she's been doing it for months. She's been working with your uncle to cover it up, and..." I felt the blood drain from my face. I couldn't breathe for a second. My mother? Stealing from the business? That wasn't just a betrayal, it was an outright attack on everything I'd built. Everything I'd worked for. All those late nights, the sacrifices, the sweat I'd poured into this company, and she was just going to throw it all away? But here's the kicker, I didn't just want to expose her. I didn't just want to be the guy who confronted his mom in front of the entire family. That wouldn't be enough. No, I was about to find out just how deep this mess went, and if I was going to take control, I had to be smart. I needed proof. Real proof. Something that would leave no room for her to lie or spin her way out of it. But as I started digging into the numbers, something started to smell even worse. The transactions weren't just small transfers. No, these were huge amounts, bigger than anything I could have imagined. It wasn't just a little theft, it was a full-blown operation. My mom and uncle had been running some sort of financial scheme together, using the company's accounts to launder money, hide assets, and who knows what else. And the worst part? They were good at it. Too good. I started realizing that this wasn't just some short-term plan. They'd been setting this up for years. This wasn't just about the family business, it was about power, control, and manipulation. My mom had used me for years, keeping me in the dark while she slowly chipped away at everything I'd ever known. And my uncle? He'd been right alongside her, helping her pull the strings. They were both playing a game, and I was nothing more than a pawn. As the walls closed in, I had to make a choice. I could either confront them right then and there, blow the lid off the whole thing, and risk losing everything I'd worked for, or I could play it smart, take my time, and figure out exactly how to destroy them without them ever seeing it coming. That's when the weight of the situation hit me. They didn't just steal from me. They'd stolen from the entire business, from the people who trusted me. They'd betrayed everything I stood for. But what was worse? They'd done it right under my nose. I knew I had to act fast. The longer I waited, the more damage they could do. But I also knew that I needed a plan, a way to expose them without leaving myself wide open. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about taking back what was mine. The business. My reputation. My future. I was done being the victim in this story. But now, the clock was ticking. You ever feel like your entire life just flipped upside down in the span of a few hours? That's what it was like for me the moment I found out just how deep my mom and uncle's scheme ran. It was one thing to have a gut feeling that something was off, but to find out that they'd been running the show behind my back? That hit like a freight train. But here's the kicker. After that phone call from my business partner, after everything came crashing down, I didn't make a rash decision. I didn't storm in and confront them, despite every fiber of my being telling me to do exactly that. No, I took a step back. I realized that getting ahead of this, staying calm and calculating, was the only way to come out on top. So I kept my cool, at least, on the outside. But man, on the inside? I was absolutely burning. Every time I looked at my phone, I half expected my mom to call, or worse, for my uncle to show up at my door, acting like nothing was wrong. I could hear their voices in my head, their excuses, the way they tried to manipulate the situation. I started digging, and the more I uncovered, the darker this whole thing got. It wasn't just the money, they were laundering it through fake deals, shady investments, things that I never even thought were possible in a family business. They had created an entire web of lies, each thread connecting in ways I couldn't even fathom. The whole operation had been hidden in plain sight, and I had been too naive to see it. As I spent days piecing everything together, I realized this wasn't just a betrayal, it was a full-on assault on everything I had worked for. The company, my future, my reputation, it was all at risk. The more I uncovered, the angrier I became. But I didn't show it. I couldn't. I had to stay calm. They thought they were in control, but that was exactly where they made their mistake. I had the power now. All I needed was the right moment to strike. But how? I spent hours in my office, alone, staring at the numbers, the bank records, the emails, everything. The pieces were all there, just waiting for me to connect them. It was like a puzzle, and I was getting closer to the final image, but there was still one thing I needed, a way to make them feel what they had done to me. Exposing them wasn't enough. They had to know they had lost. They had to know I was the one pulling the strings now. I started talking to a few trusted people within the company, people who had been loyal to me, not to my mom or uncle. Slowly, carefully, I planted the seeds. I wanted to make sure the whole company knew what was going on, so when the time came, they'd be behind me. I wasn't going to let my mom and uncle use their charm to manipulate everyone around them. I needed the truth out in the open. And man, the reactions were wild. Some of the people I thought were on my side turned out to be more loyal to my mom than I ever realized. I found out that she had been playing the "I'm just trying to protect my son" card with so many people, pulling strings left and right to maintain control. It was like watching a show unfold, and I was just waiting for the curtain to fall. But not everyone was blind to her games. The more I spoke to people, the more I realized how many were starting to question her decisions, starting to see her for what she really was. That gave me the strength to push harder, to move faster. Then came the night I'll never forget. I had finally gathered enough evidence. Bank statements, emails, recorded conversations, the whole damn thing. It was the kind of stuff that would end a career, destroy reputations, and break families apart. But as much as it was a relief to have everything in black and white, I still couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. The moment had to be perfect. One wrong move and everything would crumble. That night, I stayed up late, reviewing everything, double-checking the evidence. I could feel my pulse racing, adrenaline coursing through my veins. This was it. This was the moment I'd been working for. And yet, every part of me screamed to hold off, just a little longer. Was I ready to expose them? Was I ready to tear apart my family, my entire world? I glanced at the clock. It was almost 2 a.m. I knew my mom and uncle were probably out celebrating, thinking everything was under control. They had no idea that their world was about to come crashing down. But here's the thing, they had underestimated me. They thought I was just some kid who didn't know how to handle business. They thought they could pull the wool over my eyes. But now, I was the one holding the reins. I set up my meeting for the next day. Everything was in place. The partners, the key people, those who had been loyal to me and could back me up, were all ready. I knew that if I could make them see what had been going on, there would be no turning back for my mom and uncle. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about power, control, and I was going to take it back. But still, there was that lingering doubt. What if it all went south? What if the people I trusted turned on me? But deep down, I knew the truth. I was done playing their game. It was time to take control of my own future. The day had finally arrived. The air in the office felt thick, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something big to happen. I'd spent days, weeks, planning every move. But there's something about the moment when you're about to pull the trigger on everything that makes your heart race like a drum. You've been building to this, putting in the work, and now, it's time for the curtain to fall. I was sitting in my office, the evidence spread out in front of me, transactions, emails, bank records. My mom's entire game plan lay bare. The betrayal, the lies, everything. But it wasn't just about showing them the receipts anymore. It wasn't about being some guy who just exposes his family for the world to see. No. It was about making them feel the weight of their actions. It was about showing them that I wasn't their pawn anymore. The meeting was set for 2 p.m. I had everyone who mattered in the room, partners, the senior team, and a few trusted employees who had seen the cracks in my mother's leadership but were too afraid to speak up. They didn't know what was coming, but they knew something was off. I could feel the energy shift as everyone filtered into the conference room. The walls were lined with glass, a perfect metaphor for how exposed everything was about to be. I watched them settle into their seats, most of them avoiding my gaze, probably sensing that today wasn't going to be another boring corporate meeting. My mom wasn't there yet, but I knew she'd show up soon, thinking it was just another routine business check-in. My uncle? He'd follow her like a shadow, always at her side. I hit the button on the intercom, my voice steady, controlled. Everyone's here, we're good to go. The clock ticked down, and I knew they were about to walk right into their worst nightmare. And then they came, Mom first, looking as confident as ever, wearing that fake smile, the one she'd perfected over the years. She was walking toward me, but there was something different in the way she moved. Maybe she could sense it. Maybe she already knew that today was the day everything would change. And my uncle? He followed right behind her, that smug grin still plastered on his face. They had no idea what I had in store for them. As soon as they sat down, I didn't waste any time. I could have tried to ease into it, but this wasn't the time for niceties. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on theirs, and spoke the words that would change everything. You've been stealing from me. From this company. From the people who trusted you. The words hit the air like a bomb, and for a second, everything was silent. My mom's face froze. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for any sign of escape, any way to twist the narrative. My uncle? He just sat there, his usual cocky demeanor melting into something I couldn't quite place. Confusion? Fear? It was hard to tell. I've got everything. The bank statements, the emails, the transfers. The whole damn thing, I continued, my voice calm but full of conviction. I felt like I was watching a movie unfold, one where I was the star. It was surreal. Mom's jaw tightened, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She wasn't ready for this. She had always been the one pulling the strings, the one manipulating everything around her. But now, the tables had turned, and she was the one caught in a web of lies. I slid the evidence in front of them, transaction after transaction. It was like watching their world crumble, piece by piece. My mom's face turned pale as she glanced at the documents, the realization hitting her like a freight train. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She knew I had her. She knew there was no way out of this. But my uncle? He wasn't about to go down without a fight. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowed, and tried to play it off. You're making this up. This is some sort of... Don't even, I interrupted. I know what you've been doing. I know about the deals you've been running. The fake investments. The money laundering. He shifted in his seat, looking around, clearly trying to figure out his next move. He was cornered, and there was nothing he could do but sit there and take it. I've already spoken to the authorities, I added. They're aware of everything. All I have to do is send them this, and you'll be the ones explaining yourselves to the police. There was a long silence. The room was thick with tension. My mom finally looked up at me, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years, desperation. She wasn't the strong, untouchable woman she used to be. No, she was just another person caught in a trap of her own making. I'm sorry, she muttered, but there was no sincerity in her voice. I could tell she was just trying to save face, trying to spin it like she had some control left. But there was nothing left for her to say. I stood up slowly, walking around the table to stand in front of her. You betrayed me. You betrayed everything this company stands for. My voice was low, but every word felt like a punch. And I'm done. This is mine now. I'm taking back control. The room was dead silent, but I could feel the shift. People were watching. They knew this wasn't just about business anymore. This was about me reclaiming my life, my power, my future. And they knew, deep down, that I was right. My mom and uncle were powerless now. The truth was out, and there was no going back. And me? I was done being the victim. This was my moment. The aftermath was messy. There's no sugarcoating it. As much as I wanted to sit back and feel victorious, there was a heavy weight that came with the fallout. Exposing my mom and uncle wasn't just a game changer for the business, it turned everything upside down. But if I'm being honest, the real impact hit me much harder than I expected. This wasn't just some corporate war or a family power struggle. This was my life, my identity. It felt like everything I'd known had been ripped apart in a matter of days, and now, I was standing in the rubble, trying to pick up the pieces. After the meeting, things moved fast. The police were contacted, my mom and uncle were hauled in for questioning, and the company went into damage control mode. People started to scatter. Some sided with me, others with her. Loyalty and relationships were tested, and not everyone could handle the heat. The media picked up the story, and the scandal quickly became a public spectacle. I guess that's what happens when your family's dirty laundry gets aired on a global scale. But here's the thing. As much as the world around me was spiraling, something inside me clicked. It's like I had finally stepped out of the shadow of everyone else's expectations, their manipulations, and their control. For the first time in my life, I was the one calling the shots. It wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about taking ownership of my destiny. The future was mine, and no one was going to take that from me. My mom tried to call me a few times after everything went down. The first call, I didn't even pick up. I knew what she was going to say. It was going to be more lies, more manipulation, and frankly, I wasn't in the mood to hear it. The second time, I answered, but the conversation didn't last long. She tried to beg for forgiveness, tried to spin it like she was doing it for me, for the family. She cried. I didn't care. I wasn't the same person anymore. I wasn't the naive kid who believed her every word. "Mom," I said, cutting her off. "You crossed a line. I'm done." And that was it. No drama, no long-winded arguments. I just hung up. For the first time in my life, I felt free. But it wasn't all smooth sailing from there. My uncle tried to pull some strings behind the scenes, trying to rally people in the company to turn against me. But here's the thing about betrayal, it has a way of isolating you. He didn't have the same influence he once had. People saw him for who he really was, a man who'd risked everything for his own selfish gain. He had nothing left to offer. The business? Well, the first few weeks were chaotic. There was a lot of rebuilding, a lot of reorganization. Trust had been shattered, and it wasn't something you could just fix with a few meetings and a couple of handshakes. But little by little, things started to turn around. The company was in the right hands now, mine, and I wasn't going to let it fall apart. I pushed hard, made bold moves, and started reshaping everything. People who had been skeptical about my leadership began to see that I wasn't some kid playing at being in charge. I was a man who understood the weight of responsibility, who knew what needed to be done, and who wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. Months went by, and while the scars from the betrayal still lingered, I started seeing the rewards of my decisions. The company began to thrive again, more efficient and more united than it had been in years. But honestly, it wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about me. I found a confidence in myself that I didn't even know existed. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the son trying to please his mother or the nephew trying to earn his uncle's approval. I was my own man. It wasn't easy, though. Every time I thought about the people I had trusted, the people who were supposed to be family, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. But that's the thing about betrayal, it teaches you something about yourself. It teaches you who you can rely on, who really has your back, and who you need to cut out of your life. And you know what? It also teaches you that you don't need anyone's approval to succeed. By the time my 26th birthday rolled around, I was a completely different person. I had built something of my own. The company was thriving, but more importantly, I had reclaimed my life. I was no longer under my mom's thumb, no longer under my uncle's shadow. I was free, and that felt like the biggest win of all. That birthday wasn't about celebrating a number, it was about celebrating me. Celebrating the fact that I had fought for everything I had. Celebrating the fact that I had taken control of my own story, instead of letting someone else write it for me. As for my mom and uncle, I don't know what's going to happen to them. The damage was done, and I had no interest in fixing things for them. The truth was out, and now they had to deal with the consequences of their actions. But for me, the only thing that mattered now was moving forward. So yeah, in the end, I didn't just take control of the business. I took control of my own future. And nothing, not even betrayal, could take that away from me.